and Allie didn't like that. The idea that her friends wanted her to be safe was an immediate threat to him and their relationship, but there is no way to communicate that without coming across as an abusive psychopath.
But you blamed her friends as the reason why Anna lost love and affection for you, right?
Not entirely, no.
But somewhat, correct?
Sure.
You didn't like her friends, right?
I actually really like them.
Told us yesterday that there was issues with her friends that you had.
Yes, down the road, yes.
All right, let's talk about September. Multiple instances of violence that month, right?
Yeah.
On September 8th of 2021, you made that audio recording of Anna, right? Before you had pushed her down?
Was it a video first?
I'm sorry, video recording.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, you would constantly video and audio record people without their consent, right?
I mean, it's in my home.
But that's something you would do on a regular basis, right?
In this time frame, I started doing it.
No one gave you consent to record them, right?
Anna did not give me consent because she's the only person I've recorded.
In fact, during that, well, we'll get there, but you recorded other people too, right?
Oh,
I'll get to that.
I don't remember.
It wasn't only Anna, right?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so you, that video recording that we saw, Anna knew that you were recording her, right?
Yeah, most of the time, yes.
Yeah, she made a comment on that recording that she knew that you were recording her.
Yes.
And she saw the phone out. And she was making comments about not wanting her kid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she wasn't being serious about that, right?
Overall, based on your opinion of observing her,
I found that to be extremely shocking for her to say those things, so I took it very seriously.
We watched the recording in the last video, and whether or not Anna was joking is irrelevant. It was still a vile thing to say, especially in front of Amira. However, he's once again pretending that he took it seriously because he genuinely cared for their daughter and wanted Anna to be a better mother, as if he had any leg to stand on criticizing anyone's parenting. When we covered the interaction, it was clear that Allie was attempting to get a rise out of his wife. He had taken her phone, destroyed her laptop, refused to let her out of the apartment, assaulted her multiple times, and deliberately escalated the situation in order to have evidence that she was acting irrationally. He wanted to get a negative response out of her in order to use it as blackmail against her, should she call the police or should they go to court. It's also important to remember that Anna only made the comment about Amira after Allie weaponized their daughter against her. She stated she wanted to leave, and Allie told her to, quote, "Take your daughter, bitch," with the understanding that that would make her leaving the apartment and him that night impossible. Anna didn't randomly bring up Amira to him. He was trying to manipulate her into staying with him, using their daughter as a tool. Allie didn't care about Amira's well-being, as made obvious by him abusing Anna in her presence, as well as doing cocaine in front of her and handing her loaded guns, you know, the classics. But he wants to pretend that he did, in order to place more of the blame for the dissolution of the relationship onto Anna.
But she was joking, right?
No, that was not a joking matter.
Anna was a great mom to Amira, right?
She was.
She always took her to school, right? You didn't.
No, actually, I drove her to school before this whole stuff began.
Anna always picked her up from school, right?
Sure, because I would be at work.
You actually didn't even know what time Amira ended school, right?
Yes, I do.
You actually had to text Anna and ask her that, right?
To confirm it, yeah.
Sometime in October of 2021?
Oh, yeah, she's been out of school for a while, so I forgot.
But it's because you never picked her up, right?
No, because I would be at work. I would drop her off in the morning.
But you weren't working July through September, right?
At that time, yes. But initially, when she first went to school, that was the agreement. I would take her to school, and I would pick her up.
But during this time frame where you're being violent with Anna, she is the one taking care of Amira, taking her to school and picking her up, right?
No, she pulled her out of school.
Every time Anna left the house because you were violent with her, she would take Amira with her, right?
Not all the time.
She never left Amira at the house to stay with you, right?
She did a few times, actually.
When you were violent. Mr. Boulevard, you keep looking at your attorney. I just need you to look at me and answer the questions.
She on his ass.
You never, Anna never left Amira with you after you were violent with her, right?
I'm going to overrule that at this point, but I tell you, we're going to need to take our 10-minute recess in the afternoon, so everybody 10 minutes, all right?
During that line of questioning, Allie was Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we are going to be reviewing the case of Ali Abulaban and how this narcissist thought that he could talk his way out of a double homicide that he recorded with his own phone. This is technically part 2 of our coverage, as we uploaded a case overview last week. If you found this video first, I highly recommend that you watch that one first, as it has all the pertinent details you could possibly want in it. As always, if there is a case you would like to see covered on the channel, or a topic you want to bring more attention to, let us know by emailing me at dreading.official@gmail.com. We're constantly going through our email, adding new topics to our list, with the ultimate goal of covering all of your suggestions. As of now, we have over 4,000 topics that we're reviewing, not including duplicate submissions, so it might be some time until we get to yours, but we are trying. Please also be mindful of the fact that we are not an alternative to law enforcement or an investigative agency. If you reach out to us expecting that we can help you obtain justice through any other action than simply talking about a story, or that we can investigate a crime that you believe is going on, you will find yourself sorely disappointed. Though the vast majority know this, it's unfortunately necessary to say. So, with all of that said, let us begin. This video is sponsored by Beam. If you've been a longtime supporter of the channel, then you know that I'm able to make content as frequently as I do because I have some issues falling asleep. On average, I would maybe get about 4 hours of sleep a night, no matter what I did. It didn't matter how exhausted I was, or how much exercise or work I did throughout the day. If I tried to go to sleep, my body rejected it wholeheartedly. I spent my days groggy and in a fog. I would make obvious mistakes, and it was hard for me to have the energy to do anything, which was unbelievably frustrating. I cut out caffeine, I adopted a nighttime routine, and I did everything I was supposed to do. And would force himself to cry when he thought it would better make his point. As we covered in our last video, Ali cried in a very particular manner, one that indicates that it's meant to be observed. When Ali cries, he makes no attempt to stop it. He blubbers, allowing his tears and snot to run down his face, all over his clothing unimpeded. Crying in public is extremely embarrassing. The majority of people don't like doing it and try to hide it when they can. They try to quiet their sobs, even when they're in a more comfortable place, because there's an inherent amount of shame that comes from being seen in such a vulnerable position. But not with Ali. He wants you, the people watching, to see him cry, to taste his tears. He wants you to feel bad for him. That way he can manipulate you further. Most people cannot force themselves to cry the way that Ali can, so we view tears generally as a sign of sincerity, but that is not true here.
On October 21st of 2021, how long had you and Anna been married?
About 5 years, but we had been together in total for just short of 7.
So married 5 years, but together for almost 7.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to talk to you now. I'm going to go sort of chronologically. I want to talk to you about growing up in your household. You heard from your mom yesterday. And I want to hear from you about what it was like for you. Who are your parents?
My father is Nasser Abulaban. My mother is Dalal Laura.
And that the law is who testified yesterday, is that right?
Yes,
Do you have
I do. I have an older half sister from a different mother. Her name is Amina. But from my parents, I'm the oldest. And then I have my sister Zainab, Sammy, Shireen.
Sammy is your brother.
Yes.
And you said that you are the oldest. In your household, growing up, Mr. Bluebon, as being the oldest son, does that have any particular significance?
In our culture, yes. However, in my household, I did not feel that I was held to that.
Okay, so let's back up just a minute. You said in your culture, what culture are you speaking of?
Middle Eastern Arab culture.
So in that culture, what is the significance of being the firstborn son?
You're supposed to take place of your father. You're supposed to be the father when he's not there or at work or things of that nature. However, I was a lot more like my mother, and that posed a lot of problems.
So with that cultural aspect and then your own sort of experience, why did that pose problems that you were more like your mother?
As my mother had mentioned, very early on, we had this fear instilled in us that if we did something wrong, our father would find out. Or, don't tell dad, things of that nature. So, I wasn't sure why, but I was already scared of my father before I fully understood why. Part of having that fear was also part of what made me repulsed by wanting to be like him or not wanting to be like him. And I think it just kind of naturally bred into, we're just two different people.
So Ali describes being afraid of his father because his father was abusive towards him. However, Ali took his father's abuse and amplified it towards other people around him. While he can state that he is repulsed by his father's behavior, his was undoubtedly worse. But, as Ali has just demonstrated, anything that is done to him is considered terrible, while anything he does to others is justified. That should be obvious, given that Ali is on trial for his wife's murder, where he is attempting to pin the blame of her death onto her. But abuse victims going on to abuse others is not uncommon. Though it's not an excuse, or a given in every case of abuse, when a child grows up surrounded by violence and uncertainty, that can become somewhat normalized in their minds. If they've never seen a happy and healthy home, they will simply believe all relationships are somewhat abusive, and that there is nothing wrong with what they are doing. Again, this is not true for every person who has lived in an abusive household, or been the victim of abuse themselves. What Ali is saying here goes against that somewhat. Growing up, he was able to understand that what his father was doing was wrong, and that he tried, even when he was too young to realize it, to be the exact opposite of his dad.
You talk about the fear of being, either your dad finding out. What are you talking about?
Could you bring your mic closer to?
Oh, sure. Maybe, sorry.
Ali can hear just fine, because we can hear just fine. Whenever you see a live-streamed trial like this, the camera picks up the audio as best it can, but the microphones don't feed into them. He's hearing what we're hearing, and it's a relatively normal volume. But he has documented issues with power and control, so much so that he is making an unnecessary request here. Testifying in your own defense is difficult, given that you have to rely so heavily on another party to carry you through your testimony. You have to trust that they are going to lead you the way you want to be led, and when you're a narcissist who believes that you could do the job better than anyone you hired, that's difficult to do.
When you're talking about the fear that you had with your father finding out, what are you talking about?
Almost always, everything was an overreaction, in my opinion. Nothing was ever just a simple talking to. I mean, everything was just explosion, anger, chasing around the house, things of that nature.
Were you a victim of violence by your dad to you?
Yes.
Starting from about what age do you remember this happening?
I want to say like 10.
And in terms of the physical violence that began when you were about 10?
Maybe a little older. Maybe about 11, 12.
And what sort of form would that take? What did that look like to you?
Most of the time I wouldn't know why he's mad at me or what exactly he's... But he would just grab whatever's nearby, throw it at me, strike me, vacuum cables, shoes, things like that.
Was there a time with the vacuum cable that you were left with significant injuries?
Yeah. Yeah. You want me to explain that?
Yes.
Okay. I had wanted my mother to purchase something for me, something that I really wanted. It was Star Wars related. I'm big into Star Wars, but he didn't like the fact that it was kind of childish in his mind. I think I was about 14, 15, and his response to me pestering my mother to purchase this for me, I think it was a Darth Vader helmet that changes your voice, was to grab the vacuum cable and whip me repeatedly. And when I say whip, you could hear you could hear it. And that was the worst pain I've ever felt physically. I literally would beg him to stop, and he's asking me, why are you fucking crying? Why are you crying? As he's whipping me, you know? But with my dad, he gets in these rages, he gets in these anger, but then he calms down, and then I was just trying to get context. I don't think he knew how much he was hurting me. It's not what I'm trying to say. But then I went to school the next day, and I guess I was drawing on one of the papers, and the teacher had pulled the back of my collar. I guess I didn't know I had brown welts all over my back, and she asked me, who did this to you? And I said, in our culture, we don't rat on our families. We don't. So I had made some stupid excuse like, oh, I was running through the forest and a bunch of tree branches were hitting me. Just something I could make up on the spot.
And that was when you were about 14 years old?
Middle school or freshman year of high school. So whatever I will call it.
Pausing for another moment, it's notable that Ali actually defends his father while detailing the abuse he grew up under. What he described is objectively terrible, but while he is stating that it's the worst pain he has ever felt, he goes further to say that he doesn't believe that his father knew how badly it hurt, as if his father was ignorant to the fact that he was causing him pain. While this could be seen as a sign of maturity, Ali is perfectly aware of what an abuser would think when they're lashing out at their victim, because he has done it countless times. He was the abuser and the abused, so he validates his father's mentality so that when his crimes are brought up, he can say that he felt the same way.
In addition to those sort of examples of physical violence, was there emotional abuse in your household?
To me?
To you?
Yes.
For instance, would you be yelled at a lot by your father?
Yes.
About what type of things would end up with you being yelled at?
Wanting to go out, hang out with my friends, being out too long, or if my friends were all spending the night at somebody's house, I was never allowed to. So I would always, vent my frustration of, how come they can do it? I can't, And he would constantly say things like, oh, I'm not going to raise my kids American. We're Muslim. Like we would say in Arabic, "Ihna Muslimin," like we're Muslims. Sorry, that's Arabic. Well, it's Arabic, but it was IHNA MUSLIMEEN, which means we're Muslim. We don't do these things. We don't do these things. And that was very troubling for me because I'm first generation American. I wanted to be American. I wanted to be how my friends were.
So the type of emotional abuse then seems to be stemmed from kind of a push and pull in the household about you wanting to be American and him wanting you to remain traditionally Muslim?
Yes, in Arab.
In Arab.
They kind of go hand in hand.
What about verbal abuse?
The name calling. I mean, it's really just the name calling. It doesn't matter who's around. I don't think it would have been half as bad if he did it in private. But it's just no matter who's there, it's just like the way he would call me would startle me. I mean, he wouldn't say, "Hey, Ali, can we talk?" It's Ali. So I'd jump every day. Every time he called me, I would jump, and I naturally just have this reaction to just jump. And it always feels like I'm in trouble. And he would do it in front of my friends. He would talk shit about my friends. Look at your friends; they're so stupid. Just like you, you're stupid. I mean, I don't know what he wanted from me. I don't know what it was he was looking for me, and that was very hard for me.
Did it feel as you were growing up that this was directed more towards you than maybe other children?
They had their own fair share of abuse for various other reasons, but in regards to me being the oldest, he would throw... See, my younger brother, Sammy, he's younger than me by a couple years, maybe 3. He would throw it in my face that because Sammy's more like him, that Sammy's what I should have been.
So Sammy was more like your dad.
100%.
And so you should be more like Sammy.
More so, he would brag about his relationship with Sammy to make it seem like, oh, look at me and Sammy versus me and you, kind of thing.
And when we're talking about witnessing violence, the whole spectrum of violence, emotional, physical, verbal between your mother and your father. Did you witness any of that?
Yes.
Can you kind of just paraphrase, tell us what it was that you remember seeing your father do to your mother?
Well, my father was the sole provider. He sometimes, my earliest memories, he had always worked 2 jobs. So when he came home, he was obviously stressed out. But my mom would do this thing where she would go, Dad's home, Baba's home, Baba's home. Baba means like dad in our, Baba's home, everybody. It's like, what the fuck do you want us to do about that? Like, we'd freak out, we'd run to our room. I don't know. But we later realized he would want things to be a certain way when he comes home. He would say the kids are too loud or dinner's not cooked properly, and next thing you know, he's chasing my mom around the house or insulting her. And, yeah.
And this was witnessed by you.
Yeah, I used to sit on the couch and have my sister in my right arm and my little brother, and we would just kind of cry, seeing them throw things around the house.
Do you remember a time where your mom testified yesterday that she would run from him and try to hide in the house somewhere?
Yeah, one time she hid in our bedroom with us and locked the door, and he was just beating on it, threatening to break it down. Just stuff like that.
And this, witnessing this happening to your mom, in your memory, how old were you when you first recall this happening in your household towards your mom?
Less than 10?
And as far as you remember, how long did that go on towards your mom?
The physical stopped around, like she had said, around like the age of 40-ish. But the verbal never changed. So yes, in his defense, he has become more religious, but I'm not sure that he realizes that the things he says are still.
I would just ask for the last portion to be stricken. I'm not sure he understands the things.
Basically, stricken is his father's belief.
So in your memory and what you have seen for yourself, the physical violence continued until she was in her 40s. Is that right? About 40?
No, yeah.
But sort of the verbal and emotional continued now.
Yeah, even with us, I mean, in our adulthood.
Do you think that anything that you witnessed with this, the way your father would sort of say a name and you would jump, physical violence towards you, physical violence towards your mother that you witnessed, do you think that that had any impact on you in the way that you conducted yourself in relationships with other men?
Yeah, I mean, because of the belittling, like, God forbid if I ever said I was a man in front of my dad. I mean, he's the man, he's the provider. Nobody can compete with him, you know what I mean? I wasn't allowed to call myself a man. He would always degrade, oh, you don't work as hard as me. You just joke around and you want to do stupid things, and you're not my son, you're your mother's son. I mean, when you hear stuff like that, how do you expect yourself to be comfortable in your own skin as a man going out into the world? So I had a very big problem with anybody who's in a position of authority. Not police, I'm not talking about police. I'm talking about like teachers, professors, or even like my supervisors. If anybody was a manager of me, like, you know, we met Cliff the other day, or yesterday. The guy is such a sweet guy, but I was so scared to even say hi to him. Good morning, sir. Like, I would think of ways to run past his, oh, look busy, you know, so I can just get past his office so I don't have to say hi. Just that level of anxiety just freaked me out, and it controlled me, it ruled me.
What about your relationships, not just with men, but in romantic relationships?
Well, another thing in our culture, we're not really allowed to date. So, that wasn't really a thing. I consider Anna to be my first real relationship.
So what Ali said here is likely true, how his aggression and hostility towards other people is just a byproduct of how he was raised in an abusive household, that his father's physical and mental abuse caused him to see all men as threats and made him uncomfortable going out into the world, which makes sense. However, he is 32. He left his family home when he was 18. At that point, it was solely up to him to stop the cycle from repeating. We've said this in past videos, and each time there's a significant amount of confusion, because it sounds like we're victim blaming, but being abused in your past doesn't give you the right to abuse others. It doesn't justify bad behavior, and it doesn't validate further abuse. It can't explain it, but once you're able to remove yourself from the situation, it's your responsibility to get help. It's not fair, it's not fun, it's not pretty, it's hard work that is uncomfortable. But if you want to have a productive relationship outside of your family and not hurt the people closest to you, it's what you have to do. Ali was with Anna for 7 years, and he abused her the entire time. He had ample opportunity to change his ways, to try and get himself help, and to be a better partner, but he chose not to. He didn't choose to be abused, but he certainly chose to perpetuate it.
Now, you talked about that your dad would get upset about you kind of joking around. Was joking and making people laugh, was that a big part of who you were as an adolescent?
Yeah, that's how. So like I lacked a lot of social skills. I didn't know how to. The process of meeting somebody and opening up slowly. I'm kind of just like I would regurgitate everything about me all up front. You know what I mean? But I had noticed that through doing voices or imitating things, cartoons or things that people like, they would like me in turn. And so I kind of just stuck with it, and it helped me feel like of some value.
This sort of approach to your life, trying to make people laugh, and trying to fit in that way, did it also cause you problems?
Yeah, I kept getting in trouble in school. Just the outbursts or being the class clown. But also, I at the time, I didn't know when enough is enough, or when somebody's not laughing. So I have gotten beat up a couple times.
In school?
Yeah.
Was that something that led to beat up, a physical fight in school?
Yeah.
And that was something where was an example of you not knowing when to stop when people aren't laughing.
Yeah, because to me, it's like, I don't think I don't see how somebody could be offended by what I'm trying to do or how I'm presenting myself. But again, that goes with like experience of looking at things from other people's perspectives, which I didn't have.
You talked just a moment ago about being in school and having outbursts and things like that. Do you recall a time when you were in high school that you went to see a doctor?
Yeah, for ADHD.
Right, for ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
And can you describe for us sort of the symptoms that you were experiencing during this adolescent time period that later was diagnosed as ADHD?
Well, I mean, the common theme was, when you get your like report cards, there's like a little comment on the side by the teacher, like failure to pay attention, failure to complete assignments, things like that. So we noticed the pattern, and I think we had heard something about ADHD on TV or something like that, and it kind of resonated a little bit that maybe I might have it. So.
And did you get medication from the doctor?
Yeah. So they made my family fill out like a questionnaire about how their evaluation of me, and then I did one of myself, and then they prescribed me, I believe it was called Vyvanse, 75 milligrams, I think.
And did you take that medication as prescribed for some period of time?
I did.
And if you can recall, what sort of impact did that medication have on you?
In the beginning, it was like a miracle. I mean, I was full of energy. I'm like fully in the moment. I started doing chores around the house just purely because I had extra energy, and I felt more in the moment. Yeah.
When you were having those feelings of, what was described as ADHD, describe for us what that felt like.
Somebody would tell me something, and I'd be like, yeah, I get it, totally get it. I go to sleep, wake up the next day, it's like I never had that conversation. I wouldn't be able, I'd get bored easily. You know, just like I would start doodling instead of doing the assignment, you know. I was very heavily into video games because it allowed me to kind of just zone out, not focus on the world around me, just zone out into the game, you know. I guess just like my situational awareness was not there.
In this sort of time period, you said you took the medication, but then at first it made you feel very focused and sort of on track, but then did something else happen with the medication after you continued to take it?
Yeah, I started to form a dependency on it. At the time, I was working as a cashier at Best Buy, and I had forgotten to take the pill in the morning. And I don't know why, but it was like this devastation, this feeling like, oh my God, I cannot operate. I remember a family came up to the register. They had a cart full of stuff. I couldn't even type my password, or I was just bugging out. I looked crazy. I'm just my manager had to come in and be like, hey, move aside. Even the family's like, what's wrong with this guy? Just because I couldn't take that pill, I no longer was able to like function properly.
So you stopped taking the medication?
Not yet. I had continued just a little bit longer, and then it wasn't until my family noticed I had stopped talking. I would just sit down like a statue, not do anything, not moving. And yeah, my dad was like, he took the whole pill, the whole bottle, and just dumped it. He's like, you're not taking that shit anymore. So.
In addition to the ADHD symptoms that you were feeling, do you recall feeling during this time period of early adolescence into early adulthood any other things that now you believe were related to your mental health?
Yes, so I think at every stage, whether it's middle school, high school, I experienced to some extent, whether I knew it or not at the time, I experienced a disassociation with the rest of it. I kind of felt like people were able to do things that I wasn't allowed to do, kind of like just the way they would describe their relationships with their parents. Like they would joke like, I could curse at my dad and it's cool, you know. It's like, oh, I could do whatever the fuck I want. My dad's not gonna say shit to me. I'm like, my dad will kill me. So I was like, I can't do that stuff, you know. So I always felt like, well, how come it seems like everybody else's parents are so much cooler, you know? But it also, mental health wise, it felt like I wasn't able to interact the same way they were. I felt like I was behind.
Behind socially, or behind in the way you were able to, you said, interact, so?
Both. Well, it's like I noticed that certain friends that I had known for a while, they'd start dating, and I would ask questions like, well, wait a minute, when was I supposed to start doing that? Like, did I miss that mark? Or they would do sports, and I'm not into sports. So I would always be hard on myself. Like I would have this like, kind of like my dad's voice in my head for when he's not there. I would hear like, oh, Ollie, you're stupid. You're not like them, you know, things like that.
During this time period, you described playing video games a lot, but were you also doing creative things, making videos yourself during this time period?
I think before the whole social media craze, we had a video camera, so I would do stuff like that with like my sisters and brothers. We would reenact things. So.
Do you remember as you were doing that, feeling particularly euphoric or high during those moments?
I literally felt like that was the only thing I'm good at. Like, and especially because of the responses I would receive from people. Oh, you're so good at that. You're funny. You know, that's what I was craving. It's like a little bit of a. I don't need like recognition. I don't need praise. I just wanted to feel like I have something. I feel valuable. You know.
What Allie's attorney said here is notable because she asked if making videos with his friends and family made him euphoric. Euphoric is a word often associated with drugs, as it's a level above happiness, a state of near total contentment where you feel nothing but satisfaction and bliss. Most people never experience that feeling without drug use, and it's why they become addictive. Allie agrees and goes further to state that making videos felt like the only thing he was good at, and it was the only time he could really focus. So, if he felt that way over making small videos with his family, uploading to TikTok was basically like shooting up.
However, as you look back now, were there times when you were growing up and into adolescence and early adulthood that you remember feeling symptoms of depression?
Yeah, I mean, I constantly struggle with the idea, like, what is it that I'm doing wrong in regards to, you know, being with, like, my relationship with my father. He always had something to say about everything that I did. Oh, you don't work hard enough. Okay, well, now I'm working. Okay, well, you don't pay me enough. You don't help me with the bills enough. Oh, okay, well, how much do you want? These are... Sorry. I mean, these are real conversations.
And so, when you're looking back and thinking about sort of these symptoms that you associate with your father saying these things to you, sort of belittling and name calling things, do you think that this led to feelings of insecurity within yourself?
100%.
And insecurity in where you stood in the world? Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah, especially after I graduated high school, a lot of my friends were taking a break, you know, like maybe a year period to not jump into college. I wanted to do that. I wasn't allowed to. I mean, I was dragged to the nearest community college and forced to sign up. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I was good at. I never researched into it. I mean, I didn't know what to do with my life, to be honest.
Did you notice insecurities within your relationships with friends and family members?
Yes. I would try to be like them. Like, let's say if they wanted to smoke weed, for example. I necessarily never really liked doing it, but when I did do it, I noticed it wouldn't affect me the same way that it would affect them. They'd laugh, they'd get the munchies, they're joking, they're playing guitar. Me, I'm just berating myself in my mind, completely disassociated. I can't even focus on a conversation. I'm saying mean things about myself. I'm judging myself. It's like it increases the anxiety. It increases all those social insecurity.
At some point, Ollie, you just mentioned that you were dragged to the nearest community college, but you did not stay long in community college. Is that right?
No, I couldn't focus.
And you ended up joining the military. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have a binder that's got like a pink cover? Okay. If you can go ahead and open that up for me, please.
Okay.
The very first photo that you see in there, do you recognize that photo?
Yeah.
And is it marked D1?
Yes.
What do you recognize that photo to?
That is me on the flight line of Kadena Air Base in uniform.
So, hold on one second, sorry. There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Get to show you my swimsuit photo. Okay. So here we are. Is this the photo you have in front of you?
Yes.
And you mentioned that this is you on the Kadena Air Force Base on the runway. Is that what you said?
Yeah, where the planes land. We had a festival.
How old were you, Ali, when you joined the military?
21, but I think I was 22 in this picture.
Was there some sort of how is it that you ended up joining the military?
So I was obviously in my early 20s, still living with my dad. The same routine of me not having any motivation, not knowing what to do with my life, going from job to job. I mean, my father and I, we had started getting physical, and he would get into the habit of kicking me out and then pulling me back in, kicking me out. You know, I'd go to one of my aunts, and he'd yell at my aunt, "Don't let him stay at your house." Well, I have no choice but to come back, you know, so it's just this. Can I give you a quick rundown how I joined the military?
Papa used to beat me.
Say that there's the next one.
So we were talking about during this time period before joining the military, you were living with your father, and it sounds like things were getting worse in that relationship.
Yeah, I realized that I have to remove myself from that home.
And so ultimately you decided to join the military, is that right?
Yes.
Did you have to do some sort of basic training for it?
Yes. So after I took the ASVAB, went through MEPS, which is Military Entrance Processing Station. I was stationed to San Antonio, Lackland Air Force Base for basic military training.
Part of your military training, did that involve the use of firearms?
So during basic training, no matter what your job is, there is a week where you do live fire training. It covers everything from weapons handling, proper handling, weapon safety, and basic military strategy.
Was this for all sorts of different firearms, like handguns and then like larger guns?
Yes, anything from Beretta M9 pistol to M4A1, which is a semi-automatic rifle, to the M245 Bravo or 249 Bravo. It's a machine gun. It's huge. Yeah.
After that sort of military training, the boot camp sort of experience, what happened from there? Where did you go in the military?
So once we all graduated and became airmen, everybody would be stationed to a base that is respective to where they would learn their job that they specifically were there for. So basic training is not about your job. It's about just being an airman, being in the military, breaking you down and building you back up. So everybody else got to go to all these cool bases, but me, I had to take 2 left turns on a bus, and I was right there at the Lazy Cat.
How Ali talks about his life is strange, because everything is in comparison to those around him. He's painfully insecure about every aspect of his life, which makes sense given how he was raised by his father. But this insecurity obviously made him feel as if he was always in competition with those around him, and worse still, he was losing. Hence his proclivity to anger. Earlier he described watching his peers get into romantic relationships, and feeling as if he had been left behind somewhat, like he had missed the memo that teenagers were supposed to do that. But that's not necessarily true, or how other people view relationships. Teenagers don't get into their first relationship because they feel a societal pressure to do so. They do it because they like another person. But that didn't factor into how Ali viewed the world. A relationship wasn't something to pursue because of a romantic interest or desire. It was something to do to fit in, to appear normal, and to beat others. He wanted a girlfriend for his own social status and so he could win. As we stated in the previous video, Ali was obsessed with Anna when he met her. She was so beautiful, thoughtful, kind, and smart, and instead of appreciating that about her, he saw her as a trophy, something that would show his own value to others, and show them that he was ahead of them in life. We should also point out that at this time, Ali is not doing a bad job. His actions are measured and considered, but he's not nearly as explosive as we know him to be. Let's see how long that continues.
Was that something that you chose, or was that chosen for you to go to the police academy?
I initially wanted to go into Intel because I knew, like my father, I'm good at IT, information systems, computers. But he had told me that the waiting period would be over a year, but because of the circumstances at home, I didn't have that time. So I had asked him, I said, what's gonna get me in right now? And he looked at me and he went, you wanna be a cop? I said, sign me up.
Okay, so despite Ali complaining about his assignment, he was the one who chose it. He tries to frame this decision as being done mostly by circumstance, and that he was powerless because he wasn't happy with the direct outcome. When we've covered narcissists in the past, this kind of framing is consistent with all of them. It's always through the fault of others, never themselves. Ali chose to join the Air Force because he wanted to escape his home life and needed a quick out. But because he saw other people had better assignments, he says he became a cop because it was the only assignment available at the time. Ali looks at life like a competition, but whenever he perceives that he is losing, he tries to deflect blame. He's like a kid who wants to play tag, but then quits whenever they're it.
So that's how you ended up at the police academy for the Air Force.
Yes.
How was there special training associated with being a military police officer?
Yes.
Is that more firearms training?
Not exclusively. I mean, most of it follows, it goes through different phases. Initially, you learn law enforcement procedures, basic traffic stops, canine handling, what to look for, to see if somebody's armed or things of that nature. Just it puts you into the mindset of what police officers look for on a day-to-day basis. Weapons training is a part of it, but it's not the sole purpose of being a police officer.
At some point, you ended up going from police academy to Japan, is that right?
So once I completed the tech school, that's what we call it, tech school. Once I completed that and I got my badge, I was stationed to Kadena Air Base, Okinawa, Japan.
In Okinawa, you were at a time, was this a good time for you? Did you feel like you were fitting in the military?
Initially, it was beautiful. It was amazing. I mean, the culture, the people, all that, everything was beautiful. I was proud to be in the military. I'm still proud of my service. Things started to go. I started to fall behind.
Fall behind in what sense?
When you join basic training, right? When you're in basic training, everything is done together. Everybody's at the same place at the same time. You eat at this time. Everything's scheduled, so nobody can fall behind. But once you get to your career path, once you're on the job, well, now you're standing with people who are like 3-4 degrees rank higher than you, and I don't know if I should stand at attention, or I don't know if I'm allowed to talk to this person because of his rank. So the social anxiety started to kick in, and I just shut down because I didn't know who I could talk to, who I couldn't, because in basic, you're not supposed to talk to staff sergeants. They're the ones yelling at you like, move, 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 you know? But now people are just shooting the shit with them. And so I didn't process that I too could do that.
So when you started to fall behind, was that in sort of socially within the military ranks falling behind?
Yeah, I noticed some of the guys that I went through basic training with, they eased in so easily, and they're best friends, and I kind of beat myself up about that. I'm like, why can't I do that? You know?
At some point, did you begin to drink heavily in the military?
Yes. I'm not a fan of drinking, but I had picked it up because it helped me sleep better. It helped me we worked very long hours in the military, 12 hours a day, sometimes overtime. But I picked up drinking because I didn't have anything else to do. I was alone.
Ali seemed to struggle with this answer, and it's likely because he didn't want to admit to having a problem with alcohol. Despite talking about his struggles with mental health and feelings of inadequacy, this issue seemed to be more difficult for him to talk about, and there is a fairly good reason for that, because he would be solely responsible for his drinking. A child cannot help if they grew up in an abusive environment, and they similarly cannot help the mental scars they get because of that. So when Ali talks about the abuse that he dealt with, and how it made him feel self-conscious and left behind, he knows that that is not his fault. A person cannot control if they have ADHD, so he can talk about his struggles to focus without feeling as if he's being blamed. But alcohol and drugs are another issue altogether. It was important for him to state that he didn't exactly like alcohol, that it was just something he used to get him to go to sleep and deal with anxiety.
At some point, did you meet a man named Sean Torres?
Yeah.
How did you know Mr. Torres?
I knew of him because he was of the same job in the same squadron we were at, but on a different shift. We didn't work on the same shift. We didn't see each other every day. So, but anybody who's not married or is below a certain rank, we all have to live at the barracks, which are like dorms. So, I mean, I would see him go from the parking lot to the dorms here and there.
Did the two of you, at this time, were you just sort of seeing, did you ever socialize together?
He approached me the first time. I was at this section right next to the dorms called the smoke pit, where, I used to smoke. And I was smoking, and Sean gets out of a car with two women, which I later learned to be Anna and Julia. And yeah, that was the first time I'd ever seen Anna. And it affected me.
So that doesn't even remotely answer her question, but let's go over what he said. When asked if he ever socialized with Mr. Torres, Allie states that it was actually Sean who approached Allie the first time. That seems to be important to Allie, because he needs to be the one who was desired in this situation. He was approached because Sean wanted to talk to him, not the other way around. Despite Allie talking about how isolated and alone he felt during this time, it's vital that people know that in this circumstance, he was approached, and therefore had the social power. He then talks about how Sean approached him with 2 girls, one of them being Anna, and how he was, quote, affected, unquote, by her. Again, that was in no way asked, but Allie wants to paint a picture of his relationship with Anna as being a fairy tale, that he immediately fell in love with her, and that he would have done anything to be with her. He wants to position himself as the dutiful partner, whose only fault was falling in love with a woman who would disregard him, even though it would be more honest to state his biggest flaw is that he was an abusive narcissist who felt like his actions were always justified.
Did you know from seeing them together or from the interaction that they were together in a relationship, Anna and Sean?
I kind of put 2 and 2 together because I had seen her with him quite frequently go from the parking lot to his dorm, you know? But also I had a friend named Henderson who he prided himself in knowing the scoop of what's going on with everybody. So he had told me that was Sean's girlfriend.
At some point, after this sort of initial recognition of Sean and Anna and Julia, were there times when you would go out socially with this group of people?
No, so that's I was not part of their group. So the first, can I elaborate more on when Sean approached me? The first time I interacted with him?
Well, let me stop you there.
Okay.
Okay. So it sounds like you described for us seeing Sean and Anna while you were at the smoke pit.
Right.
Did you and Sean talk at that moment?
So the first time I saw them, they just walked. But again, when that happened another day, he saw me, did like an about face, turned and followed me with Anna. And he came to smoke a cigarette with me just to chat with me. Yeah. He shared some advice.
And so back to whether there was a time where socially you went to bars or parties or things like that with Sean or Sean and Anna.
No, I was doing that on my own with my buddy Henderson. I only had one friend. I had 2 friends, but I hadn't met him yet. So it was me and Henderson. We were both single guys. We wanted to go dress up nice and go to the club, you know. During that conversation with Sean, I had told him, I said, hey man, I see you with a lot of friends. I'd like to hang out with you guys because I'm new to this island. He's like, yeah, don't worry, we'll get you in. But he never invited me, so it never happened.
So they had sort of their own groups. You were not a part of that. You did not go out.
No, I didn't.
You went out to bars and clubs with your friend Henderson.
Correct.
Were there times that you were out with Henderson that you saw Sean and Anna together?
Yes, so we were at this club called Psycholo. We were there first. We had our own table and everything. And then next thing you know, Sean's entourage comes in. Julia was there, Anna was there, a couple other women, a couple other guys. And that was when I had, told Henderson, like, oh, hey, that's her. Like, I had told him that I had seen her and that I thought she was very beautiful. And he's like, that's Anna, bro. That's everybody wants to get with her. Don't even try it,
Pausing once more, but let's discuss a few things. This is an event that would have happened nearly a decade earlier when Allie is recalling, and he still recalls every perceived slight made against him. Despite Sean being the one who approached him, Allie states that when he asked to go out with them, Sean said they would, but never formally invited him. This rejection still burns Allie, based on his reaction, because Sean held all the social power. He had the beautiful girlfriend that Allie was obsessed with. Allie had asked him to hang out, and Sean never followed through, even though he had sought him out to smoke together. Allie then goes on to tell a story where they were at the same club anyway, which makes his perceived anger feel irrational. He's mad that this person never asked him to hang out, despite the fact that they did hang out. He just doesn't like the optics of it. But aside from that, when Allie recalls his friend telling him about Anna, he makes sure to note that everyone wants to be with her, that she was a heavily sought out partner, and that she could be with any guy she wanted. As mentioned previously, Allie viewed life as a contest, one where he felt like he was losing or falling behind. He was obsessed with how other people viewed him, so when he saw Anna and heard that she was someone that other people were interested in, she became the ultimate prize. If he could get her to commit to him, he thought it would improve how people saw him. He would no longer be a loser, who only had one friend, but the guy who got the prettiest girl in the unit.
And so,
I wanted to say hi to them, so we eventually walked up to the room.
so this night you remember you were at the bar first, they came later, and you walked up to Anna. Did you introduce yourself?
I didn't walk up to Anna, I walked up to Sean.
Did you at some point end up dancing with Anna this night?
Yeah, so when I spoke to Sean, I was hanging out with them, just trying to be cool with them. I saw it as an opportunity to be friends, and he had recommended that I go talk to Julia, saying that she's single, and I tried. It didn't go well. So I came back and was talking to Sean again. He's like, "Hey, do you like dancing?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Anna loves to dance. Go dance with her." My red alarms was going off. I'm like, this sounds like a setup, But Anna had already grabbed me and pulled me to the dance floor. So
Were there times after this night that you would hang out with this group socially?
no. Oh, well, with Sean?
Yes, with Sean.
No.
At some point, you learned that Sean had left the military. Is that right?
I didn't learn it when it happened because, like I said, he's on a different shift. He wasn't that involved in my life. I actually learned that once I started talking to him. But yes, I learned he was discharged for DUI and getting arrested off base.
So when at some point you saw Anna alone on base?
Yeah, I was. So part of the duties is security forces. So that's the official title of what we are: security forces, which is military police. When you're a low ranking, as I was only an E2. We start off as gate guards. We check IDs on the military installations, make sure we salute officers. We make sure whoever's entering the base is allowed to enter the base. Well, one day, Casey, who you've seen here, she pulls up to the gate with Anna, and this is the first time I had seen Anna since that dance, and that was quite some time. And I had gotten excited. I was like, "Hi, Anna," and she looked at me kind of like, "Do I know you?" So I thought that was weird. But yeah, I saw her. I asked for their IDs. I noticed hers was expired by 2 years, which is pretty extensive.
Hers being Anna's?
Anna's military. It was like a dependent card, meaning one of her relatives has to be in the military. It was expired. And at that point, we have to pull them over, confiscate the ID, and it issued them a citation. But yeah, I wasn't gonna do that, but I saw it as an opportunity. So I said, "Hey, can you please pull over for me?" And they're like, "Are you fucking serious?" Like, they didn't expect me to do that. I went back, I grabbed my ticket book, and I wrote my phone, and I gave it to her.
At some point, did you and Anna begin communicating?
Yeah, after some time, I received a friend request on Facebook, and it didn't click at the time because I didn't know her whole name. That it was her. It says, and her last name was Macedonio at the time. You want me to spell it? Okay. Anna Macedonio would like to add you as a friend. And I was in the truck next to the plane, and I'm ecstatic. I'm like, "Oh my God, it's Anna, she's adding me." So, yeah.
After that ad, did the two of you begin communicating over Facebook or Skype?
Well, it started off on Facebook. At the time, for some reason, I thought it would be better if we started talking through video chat on Skype. So we started doing that daily.
This was before the two of you were sort of in any sort of official defined relationship, is that right?
No, we were just talking. We were just enjoying every moment of it. It was just... I didn't really care to think of what it was at the time because I was in such a dark place. I was very lonely. I had even called my dad one time and played with the idea of doing the traditional Arab marriage. I figured I really needed a partner. It was around that time, and she popped up at like the perfect time.
So Allie just said multiple contradictory statements in this 4-minute clip, so let's go over them. Firstly, he said that when Anna eventually did reach out to him, she did it through Facebook, and he didn't realize it was her. Despite him asking his friend about her and going out of his way to give her his number, after checking her ID at the gate, he didn't know her last name and didn't fully recognize her. That doesn't seem truthful. This was someone Allie said had a great effect on him, someone he was asking his friends about, and someone who was close to one of his coworkers. It's highly improbable, given Allie's actions, that he wouldn't have looked into Anna himself via Facebook, and would not have known her last name. He then recalls getting the notification and celebrating, because he was so excited that she was reaching out. Secondly, he states that when he first began talking to Anna via Facebook and Skype, there was no real intention behind it, and he was just enjoying talking to her, but then goes on to state that he had been so lonely that he considered reaching out to his father to set up an arranged marriage for him, which is the opposite of what he said he was doing with Anna. Allie was never just enjoying talking to Anna. He was pursuing her. If her first message to him was that she wanted to be together, he would have dropped everything, because he saw her as the ultimate prize and not a person. She was something to be won, not someone to be loved.
You described for us just now feeling really lonely and you were in a bad place this time in the military. Was there something that was going on with you besides being lonely? Did something happen?
Well, first of all, the squadron, our shift is supposed to be like a family. Well, I had learned that there was a house party that I was not invited to. But one of the guys who told me, he's like, just come, dude. You work with us. Just come, you know? And I show up, and I see one of my staff sergeants sitting down. You know, everybody's in normal civilian clothes. It's just a party. And a couple buddies of mine that I went to work with every day. And I sat with them. I had a beer in my hand. And it had been really troubling me as to like, why am I not fitting in? What's wrong with me? So I said, hey, Staff Sergeant, can I ask you a question? He goes, sure. I was like, why does it seem like nobody likes me? And he goes, you want the truth? And I'm like, fuck, what did I get myself into? I'm like, yeah. It's because you're a terrorist. You're a terrorist, Abdullah. And then my buddies are just like fucking party. I felt like it was like a disc jockey. Like the whole party just stopped. They all heard that shit. I was ice cold, man. I didn't have any words. I just got up and walked out. It was humiliating.
Do you think, is that something that you experienced in the military given that you were Arab?
Yes. I was one of the only Arab Americans in the military. So I guess in that culture, you know, the military culture, it's people from all over the country. Some from the south, the north, west, whatever. I noticed that in order for me to feel like I'm bonding with them, I had to allow them to make fun of my race. They had to call me Arab or Bin Laden, or, you know, I had to allow those things in order to, you know. It also had an impact on the support of my family joining the military. Would you like me to go into that? Okay.
You mentioned at this time in the military there was a lot of sort of making fun of being Arab, being calling related to that. Did that extend to other races within the military?
Yeah. I mean, but not as bad, I don't think. They're very big on community. None of that is, so it's called hazing. If you harass or joke or you play pranks that are too extreme, it's called hazing. It used to be very prevalent in the military, but they put an end to that. So anything that's considered making somebody feel less than equal is considered hazing. But I felt like I was the only race that they didn't really care, like, to enforce that.
You and Anna continued to talk over Skype and message over Facebook for about how long before you had like the first dates?
2 months.
And during this time, was this a time where you and Anna would talk and just kind of get to know each other?
Yeah, we would. Well, I would work days. So we would work after we would talk after I'm done with work. And we would talk into the middle of the night until we'd fall asleep together on Skype.
I can show you, do you see Defense 2 in the bottom?
Yes.
you recognize that photo?
Yes.
Is this the same photo that is that you're looking at as defense, Spark's defense too?
It also says B on it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
In here it says B.
But is that the same?
It's the same photo. Yes, D2.
And this is you and Anna?
Yeah, we were at a country bar.
Is this in Japan?
Yes, we were playing pool.
Was this photo, was this photo taken after the two of you kind of officially were dating?
Yes.
How would you describe, in these sort of early days when you look back at this photo, how would you describe your relationship with Anna initially when you two first got together? Like together and like you were officially dating?
It was perfect when it was her and I talking, or we would spend time together alone, or we would talk on Skype or on the phone. We really resonated with each other. Very early on, she wanted to introduce me into her friend group, which is a lot of the people we've seen. And I was very early on met with a lot of resistance.
Pausing in the middle of his statement, but it's for good reason. It's likely that their relationship was, quote, perfect when they were alone, because Allie was mirroring Anna. Again, this was the early phase of their relationship. He had spent months pursuing her, and he was going to shower her with love and affection. If she said she liked something, he loved it too. If she said she hated something, he hated it more. But he wasn't going to be honest about who he was, and how he would present himself in the relationship. He was still in the process of wooing her, so he was going to be on his best behavior. Manipulating another person when you were alone together can be relatively easy for someone like Allie. All they need to do is just ask the right questions, and then mimic their target's responses. At first, he'd probably seem inquisitive, as if he genuinely wanted to know about her likes and interests, but after a bit of information gathering, he would use that knowledge to almost contort himself into her ideal partner. It doesn't matter what Anna said or what her goals were at this time. Allie was going to mold himself to fit those, but the more people who are around, observing the relationship, the more likely it is that his manipulation would be caught onto. At this point in the trial, Anna's friends and family members had testified about how he had treated her, and how he had been manipulative from the start of the relationship. They immediately felt like he wasn't being honest, that there was something off about him, but it wasn't anything that they could put their finger on. All they knew at the time was it seemed like he was being disingenuous, that he was lying about things that didn't necessarily matter. Did they have proof that he was lying? No. They watched as he changed his opinion based on whoever was around, and how he seemed to always try and say what he thought people wanted to hear, as opposed to his real opinion. When Allie talks about this time, and his issues with other people, he frames himself as the victim, being left out of the cool kids group, even when he was trying his hardest to fit in. But that was likely the main issue. People can generally sense when someone isn't being themselves, and Anna's friends immediately knew they couldn't trust him. But Allie is hoping to simply discount their perspectives by saying that they never gave him a fair shot, that they had some kind of bias against him, even though they had every right not to like him, because he would go on to abuse and kill her. While it's certainly possible that people didn't like Allie for no fault of his own, that's extremely hard to believe, given how he acts and how objectively abusive he is. But continuing on.
Casey, for example, she's like, "What are you doing? That's not Sean, Anna. You're still with Sean. Like, you're Sean's girl." But these are the types of things that I'd have to deal with just to spend time with this person in my life that I'm so enthralled with. That I wanted to spend every moment with, and she seems like she wanted to. But
Okay, so this would also make sense. If Anna was still in a relationship with Sean, her friends would obviously not be excited for her to be entering a new relationship with anyone, but Allie seems unable to understand that. For most people, if they feel like they are watching their friend make a mistake, like cheating on a partner or moving on too quickly from a serious relationship, they will speak up about it. It wouldn't matter if Allie wasn't an abusive asshole who would go on to kill their friend. They would still take issue with the relationship, because they would think that their friend is making a mistake. If Allie was more emotionally mature, he could understand that, and try to see the situation from their perspective. They are her friends. They only want what's best for her, and they see the relationship differently. That doesn't necessarily mean they hate him, or aren't open to giving him a chance later on. Allie frames this slightly uncomfortable situation, which could be easily forgotten and remedied over time, as being an intense hardship. something that he had to put up with to be with Anna. The way he discusses these comments feels hyperbolic, as if they were attacks on him and his character, when again, they had nothing to do with him. If Anna was cheating on Sean, and her friends were mutual friends between them, they would obviously feel uncomfortable about the situation, but he took their comments as attacks on him. If they didn't like him immediately, if they didn't think he was an upgrade from her past partner, they were against him and against the relationship. He would have to put up with their input, as if it were a chore, when at most it would be slightly annoying. Ali is clearly hypersensitive to rejection. He felt rejected by his father growing up because he liked his brother more. He felt rejected by his peers because he was Middle Eastern, and so on. So any perceived rejection, even if it's small, feels catastrophic for him, and he then feels justified in striking out. But again, he's an adult. What happened to him in his childhood is by no means his fault, but it was his responsibility to deal with it before entering a relationship where he would go on to abuse the other person. He's not excused for thinking violence is okay in a relationship because of the trauma he endured early on in his life, or because it makes sense that he would be more sensitive to a rejection. Just because you can explain why you did something doesn't mean it's justified.
But she also had a life that was somewhat that I wasn't accustomed to. This social partying, drugs thing.
So let me back up just a little.
Sure.
During this time, when you and Anna first began dating, were you aware that she was married to Sean?
No.
And so when her friends would say things like, "You're still Sean's girl," did you understand what they meant by that?
I took it as girlfriend.
But you were aware that Sean was not around anymore. He'd gone back to the United States.
No, she had told me, these are her exact words. He abandoned me. He got kicked out of the military. He was supposed to get her a visa, but he ended up going back with his ex-girlfriend in Pasadena. So she felt abandoned, she said.
And so it was clear to you that at least Cassie, and maybe some of the other girlfriends really liked Sean and wanted him to be with Sean and not you.
Yeah, because that was their entourage at first. And then now, it's kind of seemed like Anna was replacing Sean with me, in a sense.
Ali tries to speak as to what others must have thought about him during this time, and why they didn't necessarily like him. But again, his perspective is warped. Those friends had testified earlier in the trial as to why they didn't like him, and they were clear. Yes, Anna and Sean were still married on paper, but Sean had left, and Anna was under the impression he had gotten back together with his ex-girlfriend. She moved on quickly, and those friends didn't know what was happening in the relationship. They were unaware that she was still married, and they also stated that when they met Ali, they felt uncomfortable around him. He didn't seem like a genuine person, and they felt as if she were moving too fast because she felt slighted by Sean.
Did that stop you and Anna from dating?
No.
Did that stop you and Anna from spending more time together and getting to know each other?
No.
You mentioned that Anna had a different lifestyle that you weren't accustomed to, and then you said partying and social stuff and drugs. Is that right?
Yes.
Was Anna at this time a very social, outgoing person?
She had this grace about her, just energy, she was very comfortable in her own skin, and I really admired that because I was never comfortable in my own skin.
Ali has a habit of using his attorney's questions to monologue about things that aren't necessarily relevant. He asked if she was a very social and outgoing person, which the answer would be yes, she was. But instead, he talks about how she had a grace about her and was extremely comfortable in her own skin, which in no way answers the yes or no question. He also uses the moment to talk about himself, and how he was envious of how comfortable she appeared to be, because he wasn't that way. Granted, it's not out of the question to give a long-winded answer while on the stand. In fact, it's preferable, because you're giving the jury an insight into your relationship and how you think. If he simply said yes, he could come across curt and uncooperative, but his answers are not actually answering the question.
In conjunction with sort of this idea of who she was and how she presented herself, were there a lot of drugs associated with Anna and her lifestyle at the time?
Wasn't as bad. The time, well, they were smoking weed, which is fine. But I later learned that they were popping this cough and cold medicine called Triple C, Corsetin. They were abusing it, taking 8 to 16 pills a day, and it just puts you in this trance-like state. And Um, so there was things that I was cautious of, things that
So there were things that you were starting to learn about Anna and her group that you just described as feeling you were cautious about.
yeah, I felt like, well, her friends, first of all. I didn't choose to look at them as obstacles. That's just how they present themselves. It's like there would be days where me and Anna would have this great day, but then next day I'm at work and she's texting me. She's like, "How do I know you're not just like other military guys and just gonna leave me as soon as they station you somewhere else?" I'm like, Anna, who's putting this in your head? Well, I was talking to Casey. These are the things that they would fill her head, and it just makes my job harder because I'm not the one giving her those vibes. I'm not the one. I'm the one that's, we're talking about like the future. And I think the types of conversations Anna and I would talk about was like, what do we see for the future beyond what are we going to do this weekend? What club are we going to go to? What bar are we going to do? What do we want to do? Like, and those were very beautiful, intimate moments.
Okay, again, Allie frames a very normal conversation early on. Crimes used to be a lot easier to get away with. Prior to 1987, when DNA profiling was first used to get a criminal conviction, it would seem that as long as you weren't caught in the act and didn't explicitly tell anyone you planned to commit the crime, you could get away scot-free. It didn't matter if you'd left the weapon at the scene of the crime, gotten a number of injuries in the struggle, or had been covered head to toe in the victim's DNA. As long as no one saw you do it, you could live the rest of your life as a free person. Men and women used to be charged, tried, and imprisoned on hunches, or because they seemed like the type of guy who would kill someone, rather than any kind of direct evidence. Motive could be whatever the police said it was, whether that be they were jealous of a new promotion the person got, or if they wore all black most of the time. If someone new moved into the town the day before a murder, they could be charged on that alone, even if they had an airtight alibi. But through the use of DNA evidence and forensic science, the rate of patently false convictions went down. If one wanted to commit a murder, they would have to go through lengths to not be caught. Movies and television shows would depict a killer planning the perfect crime so as to not be caught, wearing gloves so they wouldn't leave any fingerprints, taking their victim by surprise so their DNA isn't found under the person's fingernails, and making sure that nothing left at the scene could be tied back to them. As long as they were careful and they kept their distance while committing their murder, they could potentially get away scot-free. Today, thousands of cold cases are being solved through testing DNA evidence, and the case we will be covering today is one of those times. Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today, we will be covering the recently solved cold case of Robin Cornell and Lisa Story. This case came to us via a Patreon request, and after watching some of the material we will be looking over today, I understand why. This case does involve the murder of a child, and researching this case was extremely mentally taxing. As such, I want to urge that anyone who is sensitive to cases involving children to click off the video. Cases like this can be traumatizing, and though I don't go into graphic detail, it's important you put your mental health and well-being before anything else. As always, if there is a case you're interested in going over on this channel, feel free to let us know in the comments down below, or email us at dreading.official@gmail.com. We are constantly adding new cases to our backlog and responding to emails and corresponding with those involved. So if there is a case you feel we should pay more attention to, let us know. This video is brought to you by Scentbird. Did you know that scent is the most powerful sense to trigger a memory? According to brain scans, different fragrances trigger strong memories because of the brain regions that process them. Going out into a freshly mowed field reminds me of working on the farm with my dad and grandfather. Certain perfumes remind me of my mom and sister, and if I smell certain scents, I'm immediately transported back to when I was younger. But in today's modern age, it's harder to find a signature scent that people can attach to you, or at least it was prior to Scentbird. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription that lets you choose a new designer fragrance to try every month for just $17, which is a steal, given that a lot of luxury fragrances start at least $50 for a travel size. Every month, you get to pick what you want to receive, so there are no surprises. They have over 600 perfumes and colognes, and a lot of unisex options. They carry brands like Gucci, Prada, and Versace, as well as indie labels like Skylar, Hectic, and Confessions of a Rebel. This month, Scentbird sent me Oh So Vert Boozy Patchouli, which my brother really likes. It's incredibly earthy and different, with a surprising amount of citrus in it. It manages to be both clean and musky at the same time, which I've never really experienced. They also sent me Cross River Gorilla by Sanctuary, which I've been wearing all month and plan to repurchase. I would have never picked up the scent on my own, but it's really earthly as well and cool. It's a lot of natural, woody smells mixed with leather. If you're interested in trying Scentbird risk-free and finding your new signature scent, use coupon code DREADING for 55% off at Scentbird, which is just a little over $7 for your first month. Again, that's code DREADING for 55% off in both US and Canada. Thank you again to Scentbird for continuing to sponsor my content, and thank you to all of you who make sponsorships like this possible. Now, let us begin. Robin Cornell was a typical 11-year-old. She was excited about everything, and every day she had new dreams that she wanted to pursue. She would tell her mom, Jan, and her babysitter, Lisa, story about her dreams, and how one day she was going to be a lawyer or a doctor or an actress. And every day they would tell her they knew she was going to do it all. Robin was extremely well loved in her community. According to the parents of Robin's classmates, she was the type of child who talked to everyone. It didn't matter if someone was considered weird or unpopular, she would make sure no one was left out. But unfortunately, on May 9th, 1990, her young life and all of her dreams would come to a tragic end. That day, Jan and Robin helped Lisa move into their shared home. Lisa had worked as a babysitter for Robin for a short while, and had gotten close to the family. She was an international student who loved photography and motorcycles, and when she needed a new place to stay, it only made sense for her to move in with a single mother and her daughter. That way she could be there whenever Robin needed looking after. According to people around the small group of women, they all loved each other, and Lisa had become an aunt to the 11-year-old. They celebrated the move over dinner before Robin turned in for the night, exhausted by the day's events. As Lisa and Jan cleaned up the home, trying to sort through all of their things, Jan got a call from her boyfriend, asking if she wanted to go over and watch some television with him. Initially, Jan said no. She had had a long day and was as exhausted as her daughter was. But Lisa encouraged her to go out and have some fun with her boyfriend. Lisa reminded her that the whole point of her moving into the home was to provide her with around-the-clock childcare, and she didn't mind taking care of Robin for the night. After a little bit of encouraging, Jan decided to go, telling Lisa she would be back within a few hours. She went into her daughter's room, kissed her on the head, and said, "Good night, I'm going to Donnie's, I love you." And that, unfortunately, was the last thing she would ever say to her daughter. After Jan had left Robin and Lisa, a person had entered the townhome through the sliding glass back door and quickly surveyed the home. First, they found Lisa Story in the room she had just moved into and quickly subdued her. Lisa fought back against the attacker, grabbing a fistful of his hair and clawing them the best she could. But after a short struggle, she was suffocated on her bed with one of her own pillows. The attack was loud and woke up the 11-year-old. Not knowing what was happening, and not believing she was in danger in her own home, she got up to see what was happening. But once the intruder saw the young girl, he quickly assaulted her as well, hitting her multiple times in the face before she was knocked out. He then suffocated her as well. After killing both Lisa and Robin, he sexually violated them, leaving DNA in and on their bodies, as well as their bed sheets. He left their bodies in disturbing positions, with the desire to humiliate them in their death and traumatize whoever was to find the bodies. Following the murder and post-mortem sexual assaults, the killer appeared to have taken a shower, seemingly unconcerned with the idea of being discovered. Shortly thereafter, they left the scene, unknowingly leaving their car keys in the kitchen of the home. The next morning, Jan woke up at 4 a.m., still at her boyfriend's house. She had accidentally fallen asleep on his couch and realized her mistake. She flew into a panic, both because she had not returned home like she said she would, and because she had to start work at 4:30 in the morning. Her boyfriend's home was only a few blocks away from her own, but she knew she was going to be late. She rushed home, but immediately knew something was wrong as she couldn't get into the door. The door had two locks, a deadbolt which worked, and another in the doorknob, which did not, but one key was supposed to open both. Everyone who had come to her home knew better than to lock the doorknob, and she knew Lisa would have never done so. Once more, she began to panic. She quickly rushed to the back of the home that she shared with her daughter and the babysitter, and found the sliding glass door completely open, with the blinds blowing in and out. She yelled out for Lisa and Robin, hoping they were playing a prank on her, or that Lisa might have gotten drunk and left the house in disarray, but no one answered. The home itself was freezing, as the back door had been open with the air conditioning put on full blast. Jan hurried through the house and was horrified to find Lisa and Robin dead on their beds. When Jan found her daughter deceased in her own bed, she quickly fought to save her life. She moved Robin to the ground and began to do CPR, hoping that she would be able to bring her back from the dead. But it was too late. Both Robin and Lisa were beyond saving. Multiple neighbors heard the commotion and called the police, and were traumatized by what they found. The details of the case were horrific, and the fact that such a brutality had been done to a girl who was only 11 years old, who asked her mom in the days leading up to her death if she was old enough to have her first kiss, made many officers sick. Many who looked at the case stated without a shadow of a doubt that it would be solved quickly. Whoever had taken Robin and Lisa's lives had left a plethora of evidence. They had left their DNA everywhere and had seemingly forgotten their car keys. But that was not the case. Police canvassed the area, obtained hundreds of DNA samples, and followed up on every lead they could, and nothing came of it. Jan spoke to the police frequently, trying to keep her daughter and friend's case at the top of their minds, but it had stalled, and people had moved on. She reached out for help from different groups and former police officers, hoping that they could provide answers, but they too came up short. The story was featured on television shows like America's Most Wanted, in the hopes that continued publicity would lead to a break in the case, but the case would remain cold until 26 years later. Joseph Seiler was in Lee County Jail on a felony aggravated battery charge for shooting his son with a pellet gun in August of 2016, when his DNA was placed into the criminal database. Seiler had not been connected to the case, and had never met Robin or Lisa prior to the murders. However, once his DNA was added to the criminal database, it showed that it was a match for the DNA that was found in and on both Lisa and Robin. He had conclusively been shown to have been the person to kill both Lisa and Robin. However, he denied any wrongdoing. He stated that he had never met Lisa or Robin, and that there was no way that it was his DNA at the crime scene. He claimed that the DNA that they found was likely his uncle, his brother, or his father, and that it had been them that committed the crime, as they lived less than 5 miles away from the murder, which would also put him close to the murder at the time. He would then change his story, stating that it was possible for the DNA found at the scene to have belonged to him, only because he had slept with someone at that location before, and that Jan, Robin, and Lisa had never cleaned their sheets. At times, he would state that he had sex with Jan while on vacation once, and that he had simply left so much DNA during their sexual escapades that it was still showing up years later. He also routinely stated that the DNA that was found at the scene couldn't possibly match him, as the hair that was found gripped in Robin's fist was blonde, and he was brunette. But to be clear, there was never any record of the hair being blonde. His story made no sense, and it was clear to anyone who saw the facts of the case that he was guilty, and many believed he would eventually admit to his guilt prior to the trial. The evidence was overwhelming. However, he refused to, instead pleading not guilty in court. It's unclear that he sincerely believed that he could beat the conviction, but it's unlikely that is what he wanted. He had gotten away with murder for 2 decades, and he wanted to continue to have control over his life, especially if that meant re-traumatizing all of those who had been involved in the case. On June 8, 2022, while awaiting trial, Joseph would write a letter to the judge in his case. The following is that letter. Honorable Robert Branning, I have a fair offer to avoid bringing this to jury trial. If you order full retesting of all exhibits with NB32 prefix, and any of them test to contain either victim's epithelial profile, I will waive a jury trial and allow you to personally impose sentencing. However, you must agree to drop all charges if my DNA genotype is mixed with, as I have said from the beginning, either redacted or redacted partial profile, because if either redact are in any NB32 exhibit, there is no way possible it could originate from the night of the crime. You know this. Pausing for just a moment, but the DNA that they matched with Joseph was not old DNA. It wasn't found on the bedsheets from years earlier. His hair was found clutched in Lisa's hand and in her mouth. So his argument that while she was being killed by another person who left no DNA in the home, she grabbed hold of a random patch of his hair that had been left on her bed for years prior. That makes no sense and is clearly false. But continuing with the letter, to include 0 in an independent lab not affiliated with FDLE, NB32A1 plus 2, NB3261 underscore 2 NB32E, and all things connected. This, of course, must also test and verify my actual genotype. If my genotype is neither 1.1.1.2 or 1.2.1.2, you let me go. I am a man of my word, and I will give you my word if my genotype DNA is in any way mixed with either victim. Redacted. I will waive a jury trial. Put me to death. I give you my assurance. I am in no way connected to either victim. The only exhibit allegedly tying me to this crime is NB32A, which I contest is geno reading of 1.2.1.2, because any DNA expert will tell you a mix of 4 people rarely yields an uncontestable genotype identifying one single individual. Excuse me if I doubt my genotype is either the genotypes quoted in this case. I do not believe myself to be either 1.1.1.2 or 1.2.1.2. CCPD is hiding information. You cannot contest. Retesting of SV1K has ruined the state's capital rape case. No discernible geno reading means no scientific foundation. The second rape charge had 0 foundation from the very start because no amplifiable DNA was present. You have no case for rape. And lastly, the very light blonde hair in Redacted's mouth and stuck to both bodies and found on both transport sheets, very light blonde is found in 2% of the population worldwide, pretty much points to another person, as I have very dark brown hair. Again, pausing for just a moment to say that the hairs that were found at the scene were brown. When the evidence was collected and logged, it was logged as brown hair. When it was discussed in police documents and records, it was described as being brown. Joseph saying the DNA was blonde is just false. But back to the letter. Dark brown haired individuals don't leave dozens of blonde hairs behind. I am innocent. There's no way to contest a non-matching genotype, fingerprints, hair color, and a mix of either adult female redacted mixed with my DNA. Your Honor, read Discovery, especially Mary LeGrand's interview. Redacted can in no way remember the number of men quoted throughout Discovery. They're both senile, and even gamble. If I'm in any way mixed with either victim, I welcome your best, no trial. If I prove my honesty, you let me go. Being young, on vacation, sleeping with divorced, willing, consensual older women is in no way a crime. Dementia can't excuse genotype reports. Even odds say it can go either way. Respectfully maintaining my innocence, Jay Zeeler. And do you really want this returned to your courtroom? I will not plead to a crime I had no part in. Freeing me is no gift, homeless and penniless at 60. I will leave Florida within 24 hours after reviewing my chronic care medication and disability. Also, sir, did you know my father is a disgraced pedophile, Cape Coral, third in command, Cape Coral Police Shift Commander Supervisor, along with his brother from Punta Gorda, both with pregnant 12-year-old girls on public records, and Cape Coral, both on probation in 1990, and were never looked at by CCPD, even though they lived within 5 miles the night the crime happened? This is why they're hiding this. This is why CCPD wants to close this on the hush-hush quiet down low. They absolutely have the wrong person, and have had the pedophile who caused this on probation employed by them underneath their noses for 30 years, and now, after charging me by jumping the gun on Lineal, they know they face public humiliation if they reveal the perpetrator of this crime was one of their own, and they've ignored the Lineal for 6 years to avoid embarrassing themselves. Think I'm lying? Check. Mr. Feinberg is aware. I will provide all family history plus info. It's someone in my family, brothers, uncle, or father. Right, so that is that. This is similar to Dustin McFetridge writing the judge in his case and promising that he is innocent and should be allowed to just leave prison. Joseph believes that he should just tell the judge he is innocent and all the evidence against him is fabricated, and then he'll be allowed to leave. He is a man of his word after all. The DNA would be retested by another lab prior to the trial, and once more, the DNA was found to be an exact match to Zeeler. Moreover, his allegations against his family held no weight, as their DNA had been in the system for longer than Zeeler's, and was not a match to what was found at the scene. The case would eventually go to trial in May of 2023, and Zeeler's defense had an extremely hard time contesting the facts of the case. They were forced to fight that despite Zieler's DNA match, he had not been the murderer. They tried to argue that the hair had been blonde, not brunette, and that the murder had been done to ruin Jan's life. They argued that Jan was leading a double life, and that her shady actions had led to her daughter's and friend's death, but they showed no evidence of this. Joseph would eventually take the stand in his own defense, and it would go horrifically. Whenever we cover cases where a person takes the stand in their own defense, we discuss what they would need to do in order to convince a jury. Usually, their goal is to seem as meek and docile as possible, making it impossible to imagine them hurting anyone. They want to seem innocent, kind, and fragile, with the hopes that their actions will speak louder than the evidence. But in this case, that is not true. There is so much conclusive evidence that Zieler is the one who killed Robin and Lisa that there is no arguing that he is innocent. So, let's see what he does.
Mr. Shirley, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please tell the jury your name.
Joseph Adam Zeiler.
Are you the defendant in this case?
Yes.
May I approach?
Approach.
Mr. Zeiler, let me show you what's been previously identified as our Exhibit A. Can you tell me what that exhibit is?
That's a picture of me and my son who's clutching my back, and my cousin, one of two twins, Danny.
How old are you in that picture?
6.
What color hair do you have in the picture?
Hold on, let me think about that. How old I was, sorry.
In less than a minute on the stand, Joseph has already made himself appear untrustworthy and guilty. This testimony would take place on day 3 of the trial, after the jury had been made aware of all the evidence. Joseph's demeanor, posture, and inability to answer the question correctly the first time would confirm his guilt to the jury. Moreover, this is his attorney. He would have been prepped on how to respond to this question, and the fact that he is unsure says a lot.
I guess I'll say 26. I have a problem with dates.
What color was your hair?
Same color I was born with, very, very dark brown.
Okay, have you always had that color hair?
Yes, sir.
Let me show you what's been previously identified as our Exhibit B. Do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes.
Is that a photograph?
Yes.
You recognize the person in the photograph?
Yes.
Who is that?
That's my older brother, Robert Joseph Zeiler, who I was raised with, but I believe he's my half-brother. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay. I'd like to have these admitted in evidence, please.
No objection.
Yeah, publishing it to the jury.
Hold on. Defense. You may publish.
Thank you. Rather than pass them off, just let you look.
These two men both have brown hair.
Do you have any other brothers?
Yes, I have a brother, Steve. He was 5 years older than me, but he died, I believe, about 2008.
And obviously you have a father.
Well, I really don't know who my father is because, of course, I was born with very dark brown hair, and my brothers were born with light sandy hair, and my mother kept that secret, I guess, for her own safety.
Okay. Back in 1990, when this event occurred, where did your brothers reside?
Well, both my brothers were here in December of '89
What? All right, stop. Where's here?
in Florida.
Okay, where in Florida?
Oh, Cape Coral.
Okay. Did they live in Cape Coral?
Yes, they were working on the Cape Coral Hospital as a block mason and laborer.
Okay. And was your father, or the person that may be your father, was he living down here then?
Yes,
Where was he working?
I believe he wasn't working. He was living on a houseboat in Marina Town, but I believe he was retired from working.
From where?
Well, he didn't leave voluntarily. He was arrested in Cape Coral driving the Cape Coral squad car.
Was he a member of the Cape Coral Police Department?
Yes, sir. He was like the fourth member down from chief of police. He was the shift commander of the Cape Coral Police Department.
Joseph is unable to answer a question directly. When asked if he is a father, he states that's a hard question because he no longer thinks the person who raised him is his father, because he has darker hair. We've attempted to look into this, and there's no evidence that the man who raised him isn't his father. When asked where his relatives were living in 1990, he begins to talk about their jobs, and only tells the court Cape Coral when prodded by his attorney. He is refusing to be direct, and only answers questions in a roundabout way. This is a telltale sign of someone not being truthful. Think of a time when you ask a question to a child. You ask them if they finished their homework or cleaned their room, and instead of saying yes or no, they begin to tell you how they were in their room, and then they heard a noise, and then they found a toy they had lost a year ago, and the toy was a Power Rangers action figure, and they remembered this really great episode of Power Rangers that they saw another year ago, and so on and so forth. They don't want to tell you something that you don't want to hear, so instead, they try and distract you by telling you something else entirely. That's what Joseph is doing, because he's about as smart as a 3-year-old.
All right, let me ask you a couple of questions. Where were you born?
I was born in Little Company of Mary Hospital in Evergreen Park, Illinois.
How long did you live in Illinois?
I lived in Illinois until I was 16, and my parents, I call them my parents because I'm so used to calling that man my father, so I will slip up once in a while, but the man I believed was my father at that time forced me to move down here with him and my mother because my mother wanted me to finish high school.
Okay, so you and your mother and the person that may be your father moved to where down here?
We moved to Parkwood Estates, was our first residence, which is Central Fort Myers by Pagefield.
Okay, how long were you in Florida?
One second. Well, I've on and off, back and forth, so from Florida to Illinois, you know, so, I mean, at least a half a dozen times.
Were you ever a resident of the state of Maryland?
Yes, I was.
All right, and back in 1990, were you registered as a driver in the state of Maryland?
Yes, I was.
Oh, has your hair ever been light?
No, never.
Do you know Jan Cornell?
No, I don't know Jan Cornell.
Do you know Lisa Story?
No,
Do you know Robin Cornell?
no.
There was another name that was mentioned during the questioning. Leanne Deller?
No, all them names I read in my discovery, and that's how I became aware of them names.
Okay. You saw photographs of the residence where this event occurred? You've been here during trial, haven't you, Mr. Zeiler?
Well, yes, I've been here during trial, but when the Cape Coral police interrogated me, they didn't show me the owner of the apartment.
Okay. I'm asking you now, have you seen photographs that were admitted into evidence depicting the scene of the event?
Yes.
Have you ever been in there?
No.
Now, you made phone calls after you were initially arrested for the event that occurred with Ms. Knisley's son. You made phone calls to her, did you not?
Yes, he's my son with her.
So, are you the birth father of that child?
Yes. When he was born, Bonnie was still married to her first husband, so they put his name on the birth certificate, but I agreed to sign the paper to have it removed.
Okay. So do you basically raise that child as your own?
Yes.
The letter that you wrote to Bonnie that was read in court, you were making reference to somebody who was living in the house and who needed to go on. Who are those references about?
That's our son together, Zachary.
Okay. At any point in time in the letter, were you making any admissions to having committed this offense?
Zachary's offense?
No.
No,
The offense for which you're charged in this courtroom.
No, not at all.
What were you referring to?
Probably should give it to him.
I was referring to my altercation with my 26-year-old drunken son.
You made reference to something that happened in 1990. What was that?
I was arrested in July of 1990
This ain't gonna do anything.
because it was my son's birthday. That's how I remember my oldest son, Joey's birthday, and I had a pistol on board my sailboat. He was visiting me, and when I went across the street to go do some laundry, I didn't feel comfortable leaving the pistol on the boat with him. I was trying to be responsible, and I took the gun with me across the street to do some laundry. And while I was there, I stopped in a jewelry store to try to sell a couple items so I could buy him a birthday present.
Okay. And were you ultimately held responsible for that?
Well, yeah, while I was there.
Well, without getting into all the events, is that part of your prior felony conviction?
Oh, yes.
All right.
I don't really do it this.
Back in May of 1990, were there any warrants out for you?
Yes, there was a warrant out for me in St. Mary County, Maryland, issued 5/29/90. That was the day that I left because they came to my work trying to find me, and my boss covered for me. I jumped on my motorcycle and I headed here.
All right. Was there a warrant for you out of Chicago issued in 1987?
Yes.
Did you make reference on either the phone calls or the letter to those warrants?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about the stuff we talked about before.
I previously mentioned how when you take the stand in your own defense, you want to come off as innocent. You want to appear forthright, honest, and completely incapable of doing what you're being charged with, and Joseph has managed to do the opposite. His attorney, going through all of his prior warrants and charges, we get the sense that Joseph is not entirely a trustworthy person, who is not above breaking the law. In the brief glimpses we get of his prior crimes, from shooting his son with a pellet gun, we know he isn't above harming others, and he's completely alright with running from the law, like what occurred in this case, and he's doing nothing to make any of his actions seem justified.
Were you ever stopped in the state of Florida?
Yes, probably 4 or 5 times altogether, but only twice with Bonnie with me.
She recited that the time that you were stopped was much later on in your relationship. Do you recall when the first time you were stopped for the Chicago warrant?
The first time we were together, when we were stopped together, was at leaving Heavenly Pizza in North Fort Myers. We were driving her Jeep, and the police pulled us over, and they put me in the back of the squad car and held me for close to an hour and a half.
Did they release you?
Yes, but they told me at any time that the warrant was still active.
Sustained.
Excuse me?
What the police said.
Sustained. Move on.
But you were aware that that warrant is still active? were you? Let me ask a different question. You heard the last state's witness testify with regard to some comments that you made while you were in the custody of the Cape Coral Police Department. Did you hear those?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes, sorry, yes.
All right, one of those comments was something about the death penalty. Why did you talk to the officer about the death penalty?
Well, I was being facetious because I knew that they arrested the wrong person.
Where were you on May 9th and 10th of 1990?
I was in Maryland.
And Mr. Zeiler, you've heard experts testify in this case that they are convinced that at least one, if not all three, of the sites of semen or of other bodily fluid that were placed on the bed sheet, the pillow, and or the exterior of the young lady's genitalia was your semen. Is that possible?
No, it's not.
This statement directly goes against his own letter. Again, he claimed he had sex with Jan, and that's how his semen and his hair was found in the home. To quote his letter, being young, on vacation, sleeping with divorced, willing, consensual older women is in no way a crime, unquote. But now, while on the stand, he is claiming he never met her.
Judge, at this time, I have no further questions. Mr. Zeiler may want to address the jury.
Let's go over the defense briefly here, because it's important. Joseph says he didn't do it, that he was out of state when the crime occurred, and therefore it cannot be him. However, his attorney offers no evidence of this. There are no bank records that place Joseph in Maryland. He doesn't have any records of working in Maryland at the time of the crime, and there's quite literally nothing placing him there. They provide nothing to supplement his statements, and instead, his simple answer is supposed to be enough for the jury in this case. According to Joseph's lawyer, Joseph wanted a moment to address the court himself and give his own perspective as to what happened, which is ridiculous. The lawyer knows this. He doesn't want to ask if it's okay for his client to go on a monologue about his thoughts on the case. But, as we will see, Joseph is incredibly aggressive and entirely unwilling to compromise. It was also theorized by Court TV correspondents that Joseph was going to perjure himself while on the stand, and that he wanted his lawyer to ask him specific questions for him to do so, and he would be unable to do that.
Whom the letter is coming says Joseph Adam Zeiler at the top, and then there's more, but that's the first part.
Yes.
And what are the numbers 47492/835-775
That's my ID number followed by my booking number.
at the Lee County Jail?
Yes.
And the address of 2115 MLK Boulevard, Main Jail, Fort Myers, 33901, that's where you're being housed.
Yes.
And that letter was addressed to who, sir?
J.G. Batista and family.
At what, well, did you address this envelope?
Yes.
And who was J.G. Batista and family?
Well, I thought it was Jenny Gal Batista.
Oh, so you were trying to send this letter to Robin's sister then?
Yes.
Okay.
No. Yes. I was trying to send it to family, actually. So I guess I was trying to send it to everybody.
The whole Batista family?
Yes.
And in that particular letter, did you profess your innocence by claiming that it was a relative of yours that did this murder?
Yes, I was trying to defend myself because no one would listen to me.
Sir, it calls for a yes or no. Did you, in the letter, profess your innocence or allege your innocence by saying that a relative of yours had done these murders?
Yes.
What he just admitted to is horrifying. His DNA was at the scene, not a family member's, not an unknown, blonde man, his. And he decided to send a letter to whom he believed was the victim's family, which is obviously disgusting.
Did you suggest, in addition to that, did you tell the people who this letter's addressed to that you slept with Jan Cornell, Janice, and a friend of hers in 1989, and therefore that's why your DNA is in the Courtyards North condominium.
Yes, I thought so because she didn't wash her sheets.
You know whether or not Miss Cornell washes her sheets?
How I got that is by the information I was given from you was discovery, and I thought that the only way my DNA could have gotten there was me sleeping with Jan Cornell and Leanne Deller.
As a reminder, he said in direct examination that he had never slept with Jan Cornell or Leanne Deller.
Did you sleep with Jan Cornell and Miss Deller?
It's possible because I was here.
Well, now you were here.
I mean, I was here in December '89. I testified to that earlier. And what I believe happened is I slept with Jan Cornell and Leanne Deller, and they were just too much of a pig not to wash their sheets.
He just called the mother of the victim.
I'm weak. This video is 7 hours, and he said it took a week to upload. And when it did, immediate copyright strike. Why is part 1 9 hours?
Tony Tote was seen by all who knew him as the all-American boy. Growing up, he did well in sports, schooling, and was even on the honor roll. He was the kind of kid who people just felt like was going places, even if he didn't know it himself. People gravitated towards him, and because of that, it seemed like things just came easier to him. It was in high school that he eventually would meet his wife, Megan. Megan was like Tony in that everyone seemed to like her, but whereas Tony tried exceptionally hard and made it a point to be the loudest man in the room, Megan was much more reserved. She was much more attuned to how people were feeling, and didn't much care for the spotlight the way that Tony did. She was far more concerned with how people were feeling, if they were okay or not, than how they thought she looked. Unlike so many other young people who grow apart as they age, Megan and Tony stayed together through high school and eventually went to college together. While at college, many regarded them as the perfect couple. Most took notice of Tony, as he once again felt the need to take all of the air out of the room with his presence and get most of the attention onto him. But still more like Megan, as she perfectly offset his rowdy behavior. According to one mutual friend, Tony had a tendency to go overboard, but Megan always kept him in check. After college, Megan and Tony got married and moved to Connecticut to be close to their extended family. The newlyweds had both pursued careers in physical therapy, and together they made the Family Physical Therapy Center, where they gained incredible success. Locally, the couple became famous as the all-around perfect pair. Tony's infectious personality helped him get clients, and he quickly became known as the man to see if you had any sort of pain. His clients would rave about him. They would talk about how they had been overlooked by other medical professionals and pushed aside. But Tony, in one session, was able to write whatever was wrong with their body and simply listen to what they were going through. He also spent a considerable amount of time giving back to the community, coaching baseball, and giving his time wherever it was needed. Likewise, Megan was known throughout the town as she was a licensed yoga instructor and an all-around amazing woman. Their practice did so well that they quickly outgrew their office space, and they opened a second location in town. Around the time of them opening their second location, Megan stepped away from the business, as Anthony and her had their first child, Alec. She moved away from the business entirely, choosing to instead focus on being a mother, and those who knew her said that was when she really came into her own. Shortly after the birth of their first child, she gave birth to her second and third, Tyler and Zoe. Alec, Tyler, and Zoe were Megan's entire world. According to friends and family, Megan spent her whole life waiting to be a mother, and when she finally was, she felt true happiness. Early on, Megan made the decision to homeschool her kids, wanting them to get a robust knowledge of the world around them, and took on the position of teacher as well as mother. She outsourced some learning though, choosing to take her kids to music lessons, as she was heavily influenced by the arts when she was younger, and wanted her kids to learn like she had. In the town of Colchester, the entire Tote family was just about famous. However, inexplicably, in 2017, Megan and the kids sans Tony, made the decision to move to Celebration, the town directly outside of Disney World that was built and operated by Disney until the late 90s. According to Tony and Tony alone, this decision was made because while on a family trip to Disney World, Megan had gotten Lyme disease, and it had completely ravaged her body. Tony spoke about how she had lost a considerable amount of weight and was no longer womanly in appearance, and how it hurt her to walk most days, meaning she couldn't get out of bed. In order to help Megan recover, she and the kids moved into a condo in Celebration that they had as a vacation spot since 2005. Meanwhile, Tony sold their home, which they had just sunk thousands of dollars into on a remodel, and slept in his office during the week. On the weekends, he would fly out to see his family and then fly back. The arrangement struck those around the family as odd, as Megan seemed to shut everyone else in her life out after the move. However, Tony informed everyone that things had just become too much for her, and she needed time and the Florida weather in order to properly heal. Despite not having a place of his own to sleep while in Connecticut, the family made the decision to buy a house that had become available in Celebration. The home was a 2-story that was agreeable to the family, and instead of selling their condo, they kept it, thinking it would be useful in case the family ever came to visit. Still though, while Tony was by himself in Colchester, he went without, never so much as renting an apartment or getting a long-term rental. Many at the time pondered why it was that he never invested in a place to rest his head while in Connecticut, but later it was found that Tony simply didn't have the money to. In fact, Tony didn't have any money at all. Seemingly, when Megan stepped away from the business, Tony had begun to take advantage of his clientele, knowing that no one was checking the books, and that most of their clients trusted him implicitly, so Tony began overcharging them for treatments they weren't getting. Patients who had seen him once were charged over the span of months. People who only needed a small adjustment were charged as if they had seen him daily, and no one had been the wiser. He had started doing this in order to pay off some outstanding debts he had, but as time went on, Tony seemed to be unable to get himself out of the hole. He kept buying more expensive items for his family and his practice, spending $10,000 on a hydro treadmill, despite the fact that no one in the Colchester area needed it for physical therapy at the time. He seemed determined to spend all the money he could get his hands on, and because most saw him as a great, trustworthy guy, no one noticed that their insurance was being charged by him. That is, until December 2019, 2 years after Megan and the kids had moved to Celebration. While at work, the FBI raided Tony's business to gather evidence of his Medicaid fraud, as well as to interrogate Tony. At first, he played dumb to their accusation that he had done anything wrong. Instead, he said this was probably all a misunderstanding, and that they would be able to get to the bottom of it easily. However, unbeknownst to Tony, the FBI had done their due diligence before arriving, and knew that he had been stealing from the vast majority of his clientele. After a couple of hours and the FBI letting Tony know just how much evidence they had on him, Tony finally confessed to what he had done. He told the agents that he was used to a certain lifestyle, and his family had grown accustomed to the way things were, and in order to provide that way of life, he began taking money off of his clients. He said it started innocently enough, but it had grown into a massive problem that he didn't know how to stop. As the interrogation came to an end, Tony informed the FBI agents that he was planning on going to Florida for the rest of the month to celebrate Christmas. He would be back early January. He let them know that when he returned, he would be more than willing to sit down with them with his lawyer present, so they could bang this whole thing out. He seemed affable and uncaring about the intense legal situation he had gotten himself into, so the agents stressed how serious what he had done actually was. They informed him that he was looking at federal prison time, and that when they did speak, they'd likely be negotiating how long he'd be away for. This statement seemingly shook Tony. According to the interrogators, he went white and seemed rattled, but still tried to put on a happy face. As they left, Tony was reported to have stated to his colleagues and clients that the entire raid had been a simple misunderstanding, and that everything would be fine. However, his coworkers couldn't help but notice that he was shaking and pale. After the raid, Tony, like he had told the FBI, went to Florida for Christmas. Tony's lies had caught up with him, and he would have to come clean to his wife about what he had done. He would have to tell her that he, and by marriage, she, was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and he was likely going to prison. But seemingly because that would be too hard, Tony instead devised another plan. He was going to kill his entire family, then himself. That way, he wouldn't have to deal with the shame of him going to prison. When Tony arrived in Florida and was picked up by Megan, Megan sent a text to their extended family, stating that the entire clan had come down with the flu and was ultimately too sick to talk on the phone. Megan's text, which is believed to have been sent by Tony, emphasized the fact that no one would be able to talk, and that phone calls would be pointless. The family outside of Florida felt that this was strange, but tried to think little of it. Megan, again, was the supermom. She was great at taking care of everyone, and they figured the family would be back on their feet in no time. A week before Christmas, the Totes' extended family received another message from the family, this time coming from Anthony's phone. Anthony stated that the entire family was now going off of the grid, and they would be turning off their phones. He then stated that Megan had lost her phone, and that if they wanted to speak to anyone else in the family, they couldn't. This once again raised red flags for the extended family, but they had no way of truly knowing what had happened. If anything, they hoped that this message was a joke, more or less. As more and more time passed, Anthony's sister Chrissy began to get concerned. She had started talking to other members of the family and realized that no one had spoken to anyone on the phone save for Anthony in weeks. Some of his coworkers had reached out and spoken about his odd behavior before he left, and she was growing more and more concerned by the minute. On December 29th, Chrissy called the local sheriff's department in Florida and had them do a welfare check on the family. The police arrived at the home, but it appeared that no one was home. The lights were off, the curtains were drawn, and it seemed there was no electricity being used in the home. They likewise checked the condo, but found no signs of life and no signs of concern. Chrissy was put at ease by there being no signs of life, and wanted to believe that the family had just left to go on another learning trip, as was normal for them. However, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong. 8 days later, Chrissy received another text from Anthony's phone. This time, it was from a stranger who had found it in a Starbucks in Sarasota, Florida, and was trying to get the phone back to its owner. At the same time, Chrissy was contacted by one of Anthony's neighbors, who let her know that there was now an eviction notice sitting on their front door. All of Chrissy's anxieties once again rushed to her head. But before she could call the police and get them to do another welfare check on the family, she got a call from the FBI. Up until this point, Chrissy had no reason to believe that Anthony would want to cause harm to his family. Sure, it was weird that the entire family was unreachable, save for Anthony himself, but in her mind, he was a good dad who would never do anything to hurt his kids. But upon hearing that he was under investigation from the FBI and was likely going to be sent to federal prison, she realized that something was truly wrong. Chrissy began to realize the severity of the situation, and once again called the police to do a welfare check on the family. She hoped that Tony and the kids had skipped town and were still safe, but something in her gut told her otherwise. Once again, the police went out to the home and found nothing. They told Chrissy much of the same, that they were probably on vacation and she shouldn't be worried about it, but it did little to quell her anxieties. For the next 3 days, she continued to call, and the police continued to go to the house, only to tell her that no one was home. Finally, on the 13th of January, the FBI stepped in. The agents that had been assigned to his fraud case traveled down to Florida with the intention of bringing him back to Connecticut for further questioning. The 3 agents parked outside of his home as part of a stakeout to see if there were any signs of life. Almost immediately upon arrival, Tony shambled out of the 2-story abode, looking worse for wear. He was shaking all over and appeared to be in an altered state. Tony sat on the porch for a short while as the agents looked on, and then turned around and went back inside, never turning a light on or moving a curtain. With the knowledge that he was in fact inside, hiding out, the agents then called the police for backup and approached the house. Once again, Tony hid and did not answer the door. Only because they had seen him that morning did the FBI decide to enter the home, using a key that they had gotten earlier from his landlord. Immediately upon entering, they were hit with the smell of decomposition. After the police found the bodies, Tony informed them that he had drank an entire bottle of Benadryl prior to them entering the home in order to take his own life. He was then taken to the hospital to be treated. It was there that Tony admitted to killing his family for the first time. There would be no other reason for Tony to feign being with his family members after their deaths, other than to try and assuage concern for their well-being, and to gain more time to formulate a plan. Him actively admitting that he sent the texts from Megan and his kids directly flies in the face of his story about wanting them to be found, and being so out of his mind with grief that he was unaware of what he was doing. The remainder of this interrogation is much of the same, and unfortunately, the the audio makes it incredibly hard to verify what they are saying at times. However, Tony has failed in the 3 goals he set out to accomplish. The first, he wanted to solely place the blame of the murders on his wife's chronic illness.